Hello and welcome back, everyone. Thank you for joining me. The International Monetary Fund made another quite interesting revelation recently, and I would like to share it with you. You may remember that about a week ago, the head of the IMF, Kristalina Georgieva, said that the United States is on an unsustainable fiscal path due to its surging national debt. Well, that's not news in and of itself. It was about time for the IMF to acknowledge it. Well, several days ago, Gina Gopinath, who is IMF First Deputy Managing Director, warned that global trade has started to fragment and it will have an immense negative impact on global economies, including the United States and Europe, of course. Specifically, the IMF pointed out that widening geopolitical divides are now disrupting trade flows globally, which is something that we've been discussing here for month and month, but it is nice to hear it from the IMF and similar entities finally. And of course, this global trade flow disruption culminated with Yemen blocking the Red Sea as a way to demand ceasefire in Gaza. The IMF says global disruptions of trade facilitate the division of economies into competing blocs. Gopinath said that this is actually something that the world has not experienced since the end of the Cold War. Gopinath said foreign direct investment flows are also being redirected along geopolitical lines. Some countries are reevaluating their heavy reliance on the dollar in their international transactions and reserve holdings. Of course, we have been discussing de-dollarization for a while now, but what we are seeing now is its acceleration. It's no longer some type of a conspiracy theory. It's not propaganda, as it may have been perceived even a year ago by the mainstream media. It's now out in the open, and even the IMF had to finally acknowledge this. One of the key aspects of this is the trade conflict between the United States and China. The current administration, by the way, is planning to increase tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles in order to make them less competitive and therefore lower demand. Bloomberg even reported that the new tariffs will target not only EVs but also other strategic industries in China. Earlier this month, the U.S. Department of Commerce added 26 Chinese firms to its blacklist, by the way. So the trade war is going on. It has become crystal clear that Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen's trip to China, as well as Blinken's trip to China, were far from successful. The entire world sort of just dismissed them, dismissed the threats, and likely just laughed at such attempts to control China's industrial output. So now we're back to square one, meaning we're back to economic sanctions, which of course is something that will backfire and has already backfired. The IMF highlighted that this global economic fragmentation is going to result in countries effectively forming blocs that are led by either the United States or China, with some countries possibly choosing to remain non-aligned. Although, in my personal opinion, remaining non-aligned will be more and more difficult as time goes by because they will likely try to see what sides would provide better alternatives and more value to them. So eventually, they will likely have to form alliances. And these alliances are unlikely to be purely economic at this point in time in our day and age. The China-leaning bloc, by the way, has been slowly shifting towards the use of the yuan. Of course, all BRICS nations fall into this category, and if you consider the fact that their combined GDP surpassed that of G7 nations, it's definitely a serious economic threat for the West. Now, the IMF did say something else that is very, very important. I was actually quite shocked to hear this from Gina Gopinath directly. She said that Western sanctions are the primary drivers why central banks increase their gold reserves and have been doing so for almost 2 years now, as they decrease their dollar foreign exchange reserves. China has been building its gold reserves for the last 18 months or so, sometimes selling nearly $1 billion a month to buy gold. So there you have it, out in the open. Recently, India, a BRICS member, and Nigeria agreed to use their local currencies for bilateral trade. The trade between the two nations was roughly $12 billion in 2023. They even signed an official trade agreement to settle transactions in their local currencies. This is not surprising because Nigeria actually already submitted an application to join the BRICS bloc and may be admitted later this year during the summit in Russia in October. I'm sure we will see more of these types of agreements between nations in the coming month, and I think so because as economies have slowed down, using local currencies instead of the US dollar, which if you use the United States dollar, you're effectively supporting US economy. So using local currencies instead of the US dollar will help countries make their currencies stronger and therefore contribute to their own economic growth. Why would they want to continue using only the dollar at this point in time? They now have options, they have alternatives, and it is quite clear that they're going to take advantage of these new options. And I do want to remind you that once countries ditch the dollar for trade, which we're seeing happening as we speak, the US dollar will return to the United States, which will lead to hyperinflation in America. The banking industry and finance companies are likely going to be affected the most if and when that happens, and this is because foreign exchanges will decline. The IMF even said that we could see a broad retreat from global rules of trade engagement, and with that, a significant reversal of the gains from economic integration as countries grow increasingly fragmented. With that being said, it is absolutely clear that there are massive changes on the horizon, actually around the corner, I should say. These changes were on the horizon a couple of years ago. Now they're clearly just a couple of steps away. And with that, we're seeing these statements of fact that we've known all along appear more and more often. Remember to like, subscribe, and share, and I will see you back here tomorrow. Take care.